Have you ever stopped and wondered, how do I start a podcast? What do I do? What are the steps to take? Who would listen to me? What would I talk about? And you've stopped yourself before you could even get started. Yeah, welcome to the club. Well, guess what? Today, I'm going to be walking you through all the steps to start a podcast so that you can eliminate confusion, stop feeling overwhelmed, and know exactly what you should do so that you can get your own show into the world. Are you ready? Let's go.
Are you ready to grow your online business, make consistent income, start a successful podcast? Welcome to Online Business for Christian Women with Stephanie Gass. It's time to grow, girl.
After 14 years of being a full-time entrepreneur, I finally made it. Overnight success looks like decades, right? Hi, I'm Stephanie Gass. I am a boy mom, a 7-figure business owner, a top 20 podcaster, and I help Christian women get clear in their calling so that they can start successful online businesses using podcasting, businesses that actually make income and impact. So yes and amen. I'm so happy you're here. And today we're going to be going through the exact steps for you to start your very own podcast. I do have a downloadable checklist. That is the exact steps we will be going over in today's YouTube video, and that is at stephaniegass.com/checklist. So be sure to come and snag that so that you can follow along with me, or you can just grab that notebook and pen, and I will be taking you through the steps today. So why am I qualified to tell you how to start a podcast? Because I not only have a very successful show that actually drives the majority of the revenue in my company, but I have helped thousands of other people start their own shows. Why do I believe in this so much? Because I know how exhausting it is to try to get leads through social media, show up everywhere, be completely burnt out and confused on what you're even offering, what you're even talking about, have no longevity, and be jumping from thing to thing because guilty. But when I finally got super laser focused on one thing, which was podcasting, I was able to completely explode my business and have a ton of success in the online space. And so I know that podcasting is an amazing way to connect with your audience, to sell your offers, to build rapport and edify yourself as an expert inside of your field, and create content that has no shelf life, that does not expire. There is no algorithm that's shoving you down. Like your podcast is going to go on and on and on forever and ever. Amen. And continue to grow your leads, grow your audience, connect and convert over time. So if you're loving all of that and you're not sold on podcasting, please come watch my free workshop. It is at podcastforgrowth.com. And I'll tell you all the reasons why podcasting is the number one way to create a profitable online business, in my opinion. Okay, so what are the steps to actually start your own podcast, which is what I promised to give you today. So let's dive in. The first thing that we have to do is the basics. We have to set up your podcast. So the steps that we're going to go through in the setup phase are setting your launch date. Go ahead and pick, when am I going to launch? When people go through my course, Podcast Pro University, I teach them how to get this show launched in 30 days or less. So I would really like that. I hate hearing, oh yeah, I'll start my podcast, in 5 years from now. No. Like, starting your podcast is not the hard part. It's after that gets hard. Like, we got to get the podcast going so you can start to create those amazing relationships with people over time. The second thing we've got to do is we've got to get clarity on what the podcast is going to be about. What are we going to call the podcast? What is the tagline of the show going to be? Kind of getting that clarity on the content planning. All of that goes inside of planning what the podcast is really going to encompass. That's super, super important. The next thing that we need to do is create podcast channel art. So once you have clarity on what the podcast is called and what the tagline is of the show, you need channel art. And if I was to give you a gold nugget here, wish I had a gold nugget. Ding, gold nugget. It is that you must have really great podcast art. It's like, if you were going to write a best-selling book, would you go and create your own best-selling cover art for your cover for your book? Probably not. You'd probably pay the couple $100 or whatever it might cost to have a professional put together the cover of your new book, because you want to be a bestseller, right? It's the same for podcasting. So really incredible podcast art. And inside my course, I teach you guys what exactly that entails, what your art should look like. And I have some amazing resources for you guys if you need help with creation. So the next thing that we need to do, once you have those core pieces of the basics around the show kind of set up, is we need to order equipment. So I have some really super simple, affordable equipment that I recommend in my course. One of which right here being the Yeti mic and a little $10 Amazon pop filter, super cheap. We also need to get our software set up, which again, super simple software that we recommend. I host my podcast on Podbean, but wherever you want to host is great. Just make sure that you own the rights to your podcast and that you are going to be able to host an RSS feed that will be shareable on that podcast host. Some other things we want to do inside of the basics and setup phase are determine who our podcast is going to serve. So it's one thing to pick the podcast name, for example, Macros for Moms podcast, and the tagline of the podcast can be something like lose weight in less than 30 days, or it can be something like easy, simple meals for busy working moms. Let's give it that clarity, that consistency. And then we really want to uncover and understand who are we serving with this podcast. That is going to help you immensely with your conversion, with the way that you show up on the show, with the things that you talk about. You've got to understand your person. So do that deep dive into who you're going to serve, what pain points they're experiencing, what problems they're facing, and then you can use that to come up with that content planning. A few other bonus tips here in the basics and setup phase would be to decide if you're going to do seasons or just recurring episodes on your podcast, if you're going to do interviews versus solo shows, etc. Now, if you're wondering like, oh my gosh, what the heck? How do I actually do all of these things? Inside of my checklist, I have hyperlinked for you guys a podcast episode training for almost every single one of these steps. So if you want a deeper dive here, again, completely free, it is stephaniegass.com/checklist, free download, clickable links. You can learn at a much more in-depth level how to really do each and every one of these steps. So let's keep going. The next big overarching step that we need to take is to actually publish the podcast. So all of those things I just went over were set up. Now we need to publish. So getting your show published is that second hurdle that I really see people get stuck on because they're just afraid. Like clicking publish is like, I'm actually doing the thing. And all those fears come rushing in and all of those like limiting beliefs and what will my neighbor Bob's wife Jane think of me? I'm going to have a podcast about macros. Like, who does she think she is, Bob? Who cares? All we have to worry about is that we are stepping out in faith in our gifting, speaking to the people that God has called us to speak to, that we are obedient in showing up and blessing the world with whatever it is that God has called us to do, that beautiful thing that you are so passionate about, that your business is structured around, the mission work, the ministry that you want to create. It's your responsibility to get out there and to open your mouth and he shall fill it, right? When we look to scripture for what does God's truth say over you using your voice to spread your message, it's yes, let's go. Okay. So we're not going to worry about what people think of us. We are going to actually take the steps. So what are those steps to getting our podcast published? Well, what we need to do is get our RSS feed automatically shared across all of the different podcasting outlets. And so this is something that inside your podcast host, Podbean, for example, which is the one I use, it's literally automatic. And you go through and you click all the little buttons like share it to Apple Podcasts, share it to Google, share it to Spotify, and your host will automatically disseminate that for you. That's why we want to invest in a good quality podcast host. We also need to create an introductory jingle and an exit jingle. If you guys want to come listen to mine to get an example of that, you can go listen to Online Business for Christian Women and you can hear what does my jingle sound like? What does it sound like when we end the show and get kind of a vibe for what that would sound like. And we also need to come up with our first 3 podcast episodes. Now, I have a really cool episode for you guys that's linked in the checklist that teaches you how to organize your episodes with a particular outline and how to organize your episodes so that it follows something I like to call the ISTC method. Again, those are totally free trainings that I have for you inside the checklist. So be sure to check those out. Some other tips to publishing your show is we have got to focus inside of our episodes on call to actions that are going to support whatever the thing is we want our listener to do. So let me rewind. First, we need to provide a ton of value. Okay. So we've got this podcast episode and we're going to record the episode. We're going to do it really simply using really affordable stuff, really affordable equipment, affordable software. We're going to show up. We're going to have an idea in our mind. For example, if I'm doing the Macros for Moms podcast, my very first episode might be something like 3 ways to understand, to make macros simple, something like that. Or it could be the number one thing to understand when it comes to macros for weight loss, or how to set up a macro tracking app in your phone for free, or what should your macros look like if you're a busy working mom who wants to lose weight. These would be podcast episode titles that I might want to record. So I would sit down and I would have a light outline for my episode. And then I would first go through my ISTC formula to come up with what the structure of the podcast would be. And I'm really going to focus on connecting with my listener. So I'm going to story tell. I'm going to teach them something that they can walk away with, something that will be helpful for them. But then I'm also really going to entice them to do something now, right? Like, do I want them to come and join my Macros for Moms Facebook community? Do I want them to purchase the Macros for Moms method, my e-course? What do I want them to do? And that is going to be kind of infused throughout that podcast episode that I'm recording. So that's something you want to keep in mind. If you don't have an offer, you don't have an email list, you don't have a website, it does not matter. You are so great. You just start that podcast and pour out and bless, and know that the next thing you're going to focus on is how to nurture your leads, which I've got you. I've got over 700 podcast episodes on how to actually nurture, connect, convert, all of that. So don't worry, we'll go through those steps together. But today our focus is let's get the podcast started. Now, once we have our 3 episodes recorded, and I use Audacity to edit my podcast episodes, we are then going to upload our 3 episodes, add a description or AKA show notes with any relevant links that we have. And we are going to click that little publish button. That's literally it. Okay. So we set up our podcast and then we get our show published. Now, the final step 3, is we have to launch the podcast. So it only does us so much good if we just start a podcast and then we go hide under a rock and we don't tell anybody and we're terrified because, like I said, the neighbor may find out. Like, no. We want to launch the podcast and have some success. It's such a beautiful time to really get a high ranking on the podcasting charts, because a lot of people at once can come and like the show and leave a review and like really bump up your podcasting algorithm. It's not a creepy algorithm. It's a good one. It's like they'll feature you if you have a lot of activity going in your podcast. And anyway, we want to get that traction and that visibility going in your podcast. So I have a particular launch strategy that I teach inside of my course, Podcast Pro University. But I also touch on my launch strategy here in the checklist as well. So even when you guys download the free checklist, you will be able to follow along with my launch strategy. I have a step-by-step in here to make it really super simple for you guys. But in a nutshell, we're going to ask all the people that we personally know within a 24 to 72 hour period to go and subscribe to the show and leave us a positive review, listen, and share. This tiny action, like let's say you know 20 people. Oh my gosh. Well, now you have 20 reviews on your podcast. You have shared it with, hopefully 5 of those people shared it with their friends. There's 5 new leads. You've got some algorithm juices flowing within the podcasting apps and within Apple Podcasts. And you also are really starting to grow in the podcasting charts, because the podcasting charts are reading, oh, wow, you had 20 reviews in this particular amount of time. Like your podcast must be pretty legit. And like they kind of lift up your show up in the rankings, and you can start to rank, which is really good for marketing, which is all that is. Okay. So that's kind of a touch point on what my launch entails of your podcast, which makes it really easy. I'm not asking you guys to go crazy on social media. I actually don't love social media as a way to grow your business. I personally don't use Instagram on a personal level. We don't even use it as a business. I personally I don't even have a TikTok account. Like I believe so immensely in using long form methods to grow an organic audience, like podcasting. And I'm just now getting into YouTube and blogging. We've been blogging for a lot of years. Our Pinterest is amazing. Like Those organic methods are things that you can control, which I absolutely love when it comes to marketing and when it comes to making money. So that's it in a nutshell. Like those are the steps. But if you want a deeper dive here, again, the checklist is at stephaniegass.com/checklist. I also have a free workshop, 40 minutes, that will take you visually through how podcasting works to make consistent income in less than 2 hours a week. And that is at podcastforgrowth.com. And I've mentioned my podcast quite a few times today. So go on and check it out. Over 700 and something episodes to help you grow your online business, start a podcast, scale, make consistent income, glorify God, and really become that kingdom entrepreneur that you're called to be. And that is online business for Christian women. Thanks for being here today and checking out the channel. I will meet you back here again really soon with another amazing show. Be sure to subscribe and share this with a friend. Click those notification bells to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I will see you again soon. God bless. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him so that you may overflow with the power of the Holy Spirit. Romans 15:13. I'll see you soon. Bye.